Thanks for joining, and in this video we'll be taking a look at solving problems using long division. Now let's get started. Now before we go ahead and solve this problem, there are two terms that you need to be familiar with, and those two terms are a dividend and a divisor. Now the dividend is a number that you'll be dividing. So in our case, that would be 194. And our divisor is a number that will be dividing the dividend. And that number is what we call our divisor. Now with that out of the way, let's get back to our problem. So let's say 194 divided by 2. Now to solve this problem, we first need to find how many times can 2 go into 19. So how many times can 2 go into 19? That will be 8 times. 9 times, sorry. So we'll put our 9. Then we'll multiply 2 by 9, and that should be 18. Then we'll subtract 18 from 19. That leaves us with 1. Now that we found how many times 2 can go into 19, we need to take down our 4, or make a copy of our 4, and we need to divide 2 by 14. So 2 into 14 goes 7 times. 2 times 7 is 14. When we subtract 14 from 14, we're left with 0. Now when dividing, our goal is to end with a remainder of 0. So now that we are left with a remainder of 0, our problem is solved. Now the answer for our problem 194 divided by 2 is 97. Now let's move on to another problem. Now let's say we had the problem 360 divided by 5. What would that be equal to? Now we draw our long division sign, we plug in our dividend and our divisor. Now how many times can 5 go into 36? So that goes 7 times. 5 times 7 is 35. 36 minus 35, we're left with 1. Then we pull down a copy of our 0. And what is 5 into 10? How many times can 5 go into 10? That is 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. When we subtract 10 from 10, we're left with 0. And so our answer for this question would be 72. Now let's move on to another problem. Now let's say we were asked to divide 1,220 by 4. Now when we go ahead and set that up, we'll have 1,220 as our dividend, and our divisor is 4. Now how many times can 12 be divided by 4? That's 3 times. 4 times 3 is 12. When we subtract 12 from 12, we're left with 0. Can 4 go into 0? No, so we're going to put a 0 here, and we're going to pull down our 2, or a copy of our 2. Now, can 4 go into 2? No. So we're going to go ahead and pull down another copy, but this time it would be of our 0. And now, can 4 go into 20? How many times? 5 times. 4 5 is 20. When we subtract 20 from 20, we're left with 0. And so our final answer is equal to 305. Now let's move on to another problem. Now let's say we had 2,742 divided by 6. You can go ahead and pause the video and try this one for yourself. Now let's set out our problem. So we'll have 2,742, or dividend, divided by 6. Now, how many times can 6 go into 27? That is 4 times. 4 6s, 24. 27 minus 24 is 3. Now we will make a copy of our 4. Now how many times can 6 go into 24 or into 34? That'll be 5 times. 6 5 30. When we subtract 30 from 34, we're left with 4. And so we go ahead and pull down a copy of our 2 over here. And how many times can 6 go into 42? And that will be 7 times. And so our final answer will be 457. And that would be the solution for that problem. Now let's move on to another example. Now let's say we had a double-digit divisor. So let's divide 1625 divided by 13. Now let's set out our problem. So our dividend would be 1625 and our divisor would be 13. Now how many times can 13 go into 16? 1 time. 13 times 1 will be 13. 16 minus 13, and we're left with 3. Now we will make a copy of our 2. Now how many times can 13 go into 32? That will be 2 times. 2 times 13 will be 26. 32 minus 26, and we're left with 6. Then we make another copy, but this time of 5. Now how many times can 65 be divided by 13? So that will be 5 times. 13 times 5 will be 65. And 65 subtract 65 is 0. And so our final answer for this question will be 125. Now let's do another example. Let's go with a larger number. And let's say we had a dividend of 4,180 divided by 22. Go ahead and work that out for me. So we'll have this set out. 4,180 divided by 22. How many times can 22 go into 41? And that will be 1 times. 22 times 1 would be 22. And 41 subtract 22, and that will be 19. And so we will need to pull down a copy of our 8. Now 22 goes into 198. How many times? That's 9 times. And 9 times 22 will be 198. 198 subtract 198, we're left with 0. But we have a 0 right here. So we would put a copy of this 0 on top. And so this becomes 190. Now let's say we had a larger dividend and a larger divisor. So this problem will be 53,652 divided by 68. Now let's go ahead and set that out. So 53,652 as our dividend, and our divisor as 68. Now how many times can 68 go into 536? And that will be 7 times. Now 7 times 68 will be 476. And with 536 subtract 476, we are left with 60. Now 60 cannot be divided by 68, and so we will need to pull down a copy of our 5. And so how many times can 605 be divided by 68? That would be 8 times. And 8 times 68 gives us 544. So 605 subtract 544, and that will be 61. Now, can 61 be divided by 68? No. And so we will need to pull down a copy of our 2 to make that possible. And so our new number to be divided will be 612. Now, how many times can 612 be divided by 68? And that will be 9 times. 9 times 68, 612. And our final remainder will be 0, and so our answer will be 789. Now let's move on to another problem. Now let's say we had 95,688 divided by 54. We can go ahead and set that out. Now how many times can 95 be divided by 54? That'll be 1 times. So that'll be 95 subtract 54. And we're left with 41. Can 54 go into 41? No. So we need to pull down a copy of the 6. Now how many times can 416 be divided by 54? That will be 7 times. 54 times 7, and that will be 378. And 416 subtract 378 will be 38. Can 38 be divided by 54? No. So we would need to pull down a copy of our 8. So when we go ahead and pull that down, the new number will be 388. And what is 388 divided by 54? That should be 7 as well. And 54 multiplied by 7 gives us 378. And 388 subtract 378, and we're left with 10. And can 54 go into 10? No. So we need to pull down a copy of the other 8. And this new number will be 108. Now, how many times can 108 be divided by 54? That will be 2 times. 2 times 54 is 108. And 108 subtract 108 is 0. And so our final answer will be 1,772. And that's how we would go ahead and solve that problem. Now let's take a look at this problem. Now let's say we had 80,340 divided by 60. You can pause the video and try this one for yourself. Now let's have this set out. So we'll have 80,340 divided by 60. So how many times can 80 be divided by 60? That'll be 1 times. 60 times 1 will be 60, and 80 subtract 60 is 20. Now, because we cannot divide 20 by 60, we need to make a copy of our 3. And so that new number becomes 203. Now, how many times can 203 be divided by 60? That should be 3 times. 3 times 60 will be 180. And 203 subtract 180 should leave us with 23. Now, because we're not able to divide 23 by 60, we need to pull down a copy of our 4. And that new number becomes 234. Now, how many times can we get 60 from 234? And that should also be 3 times, with a remainder of 54. So that will be 3 times 60, which is 180. and 234 subtract 180, and we're left with 54. Now, can we divide 54 by 60? No, so we need to make a copy of our 0. And this new number becomes 540. Now, how many times can we get 60 from 540? That should be 9 times. And so our final answer will be 1,339. Right? Now, let's say we had 83,638 divided by 76. What would our answer be? So, let's go 83,638 divided by 76. Now, how many times can we get 76 from 83? That's one time. 1 times 76 will be 76, and 83 subtract 76 will be 7. And so we'll need to pull down a copy of our 6. Now, how many times can we get 76 from 76? That's 1 time. 76 times 1 is 76. And this will be 0. Now, usually our goal is to have a remainder of 0. But because we have 2 more digits here, we need to work with those as well. And so we will go ahead and pull down our 3. Now, can 3 be divided by 76? No. So we put a 0. And we go ahead and pull down our 8 one more time. And this new number becomes 38. Now, can 38 be divided by 76? No. So we're going to put 0. But as you can see, our remainder is not 0, which means we're not done. But because we have no more numbers, we need to put in decimal point and a 0. And because we have a decimal point here, we need to put 1 right here. Now, we can go ahead and pull down a copy of our 0. And how many times can 380 be divided by 76? That should be 5 times. And 76 times 5 will be 380. 380 subtract 380 is 0. And so our final answer for this problem will be 1,100.5. And that's how we would. And finally, let's say we had 787,996 divided by 88. Now let's go ahead and set out our problem. So our dividend will be 787,996, and our divisor will be 88. Now, how many times can 787 be divided by 88? That should be 8 times. 88 multiplied by 8 will give us 704. And 787 subtract 704, and we should be left with 83. Now, can 83 be divided by 88? No, so we'll pull down our 9. And this becomes 839. Now, how many times can 839 be divided by 88? That should be 9 times. 9 multiplied by 88 should give us 792. And 839 minus 792, and we should be left with 47. And so we should go ahead and pull down another 9, or a copy of that 9, right here. And our new number would be 479. Now, how many times can 479 be divided by 88? That would be 5 times. And 5 times 88 will be 440. 479 subtract 440, and that will be 39. And we can go ahead and pull down a copy of our 6. How many times can 396 be divided by 88? That should be 4 times. 4 multiplied by 88 will be 352. And 396 subtract 352 should leave us with 44. Now, our remainder should be 0, but it's 44. So we need to add a decimal point and a 0. And because we have a decimal point and 0 here, we should have a decimal point up here. And then we can go ahead and pull down our 0. Now, how many times can 440 be divided by 8? And that should be 5 times. And so our final answer is 8,954.5. Alright, and that will be it for our problem. Now let's end the video here. I think we went through a lot of examples today, and you guys should be very familiar with how to complete a long division problem. Thanks again for joining, and I hope you learned a lot.